2 o'clock start time. What's going on in your area? It is Swedish Days weekend here in Holdridge, and it's going to be a hot one. I personally
Lori? I think we lost Lori. I'm not sure what happened.
You need the car.
Well, if you want to pop, I'm gonna have to go either to Runza or somewhere down there. I mean, I could walk, but it's like a 2-hour walk.
Whichever you want.
You want diet, go for something.
Whatever, yeah.
Okay, can everybody see the, while we wait for Lori to come back, can everybody see our first question? Tell us where you're from, and is there a community celebration happening in your area this summer? You can type that in the chat box, or you can open up your mic and talk to us. We love hearing from everybody. We don't always get to hear from everybody, but we love hearing from everybody. So.
Do I want to change my name, or do I do that? Can I do it?
You're muted.
Oh.
Okay, we still don't have Lori back. There she is. You're muted now, Lori.
Okay, I do not know what happened there.
You jinxed yourself.
That little glitch or gremlin that was in my email earlier has hit me in my Zoom here. So did anybody celebrate or share their community celebrations? I see Jay's Days in Pierce coming up. And I wanted to share this because tourism is such an important part of our state economy. So if there's something going on that catches your eye, Auroran Days, if I'm saying that right, is going on next weekend in Aurora. I think it's Auroran, isn't it? Yeah. And Bertrand Days are coming up also later in June. So, but if you see something of interest, stop in at one of those community celebrations. As I started to say, Leanne, my co-pilot today, is Swedish. She might tell us the story of is it Dala or Dala horse? And you're muted, Leanne.
Yep, it is Dala horse, D-A-L-A. And so that's the traditional wood carved horse that's pictured there. I am just like 51% Swede. So yeah, I've been welcomen. That's the welcome way.
Okay, good.
Yeah, good stuff. They'll have a Swedish girl and a Swedish boy in the parade. And yeah, it'll be a nice celebration. My mother's making rosettes, which those are crispy little crunchy little, they're fried and they put powdered sugar on them. I don't know how to describe them. They're just like they're not pastry. They're just a crunchy little thing that you air fry.
Flour. Yeah.
Yep. In the flower shape.
The Schuyler, Brian shared that in Schuyler, the Library Foundation is having a summer concert series starting in August through September. So another good thing. And Columbus Days in August, shared by Jean. So I've got to grab one thing.
Candlelight Christmas. Hard to think about Christmas when it's steamy in June.
Yeah, Hardington Days. So if you've got time this weekend, stop by some of these community celebrations. And I know here in Holdridge, there are a lot of class reunions, so it's growing bigger and bigger by the year. So, well, let us know that you're here. As Stacy mentioned, Swedish Days is coming up here in Holdridge, but let us know what's going on in your community, even as we begin to start our webinar today. Take advantage of some opportunities around the state to sample ethnic cuisine or just celebrate with the locals and spend some money while you're out and about. So I also want to recognize the State of Nebraska Department of Economic Development for being a financial sponsor for their support of the HomeNE Learning Network. We appreciate their support. So if a DED staff member is in your community, be sure and tell them thank you for supporting us through the trust fund program. So At this time, I do want to honor everyone's time and get started. So a reminder to all of you who are here, we are also streaming this to our YouTube channel. So that gives you options to watch today's webinar. If you have technical difficulties like I just did, feel free to step over to YouTube and pick it up there. So welcome and good afternoon. I'm Lori Ferguson with South Central Economic Development District. And I just want to welcome you and thank you again for joining us and contributing to the growth of HomeNE. Whether this is your first webinar or the first of many, it is our goal that your organization or your community is seeing housing success as a result of your participation in the information that's provided through this webinar series. It's hard to believe we are in our 5th year of doing this, so it's all good stuff. So today, Sherry, if you want to advance the slide, please. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from two very familiar faces to our HomeNE Learning Network, Ron Tillery. One more, please, Sherry. Ron Tillery from Phelps County Development Corporation and Cliff Mesner of Mesner Development, as they share their story, the struggles and the successes of the Crew subdivision here in Holdridge. I am really excited to hear what they're going to say about that project. So before we begin today, we do want to know one or two things from you. What interests you about today's topic? And also, do you have some local housing incentives in place? We asked that question last month, and we'd like to continue to gather your information. Feel free to enter your comments in the chat box, as we'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar today. So HomeNE is a learning network, as I've shared with you, and we learn best when we interact and engage with each other. So we want to hear your thoughts. We will be recapping our gathering from last week at the conclusion of the day, and it was a great event, great people, great networking. And so we just want to keep that interaction going. So at this time, I usually turn our webinar over to Sharon Heffley, who's the Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District. Unfortunately, she is unable to be with us today. So Leanne Yoakum is co-piloting today's webinar with me. She is our Deputy Director here at SCED, and she's going to be stepping in to give a welcome and as well as introduce our speakers today. So Leanne.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the June 2022 HomeNE webinar series. As most of you know, the South Central Economic Development District serves as the lead agent for this learning network that is statewide, and we're glad that you're here. HomeNE is designed for people from all across Nebraska, seeking to successfully address our local housing challenges. And HomeNE's purpose is to provide a setting that can both provide face-to-face and online opportunities to foster interaction, engagement, skill building for local individuals who are passionate about addressing the housing shortage in their communities. It also serves to empower and encourage those who participate to apply what they learn through the different avenues available to them. And it is my pleasure that we are joined today by Ron Tillery of Phelps County Development Corporation and Cliff Mesner of Mesner Development. And I'm going to give a short bio here. Cliff Mesner and his wife Kathy are the owners of Mesner Development Company. They have been actively involved in community development and housing throughout rural Nebraska for many years. Some might call them champions of housing here across the state. Serving as a city attorney and economic development director, taught Cliff that the importance of housing to the growth of communities. Mesner Development focuses on affordable and workforce housing, working with local, state, and federal agencies to create public-private partnerships for housing developments in small towns in Nebraska and Kansas. Our other co-presenter today is Ron Tillery from the Phelps County Development Corporation, and he's been the executive director and just celebrated an anniversary there of May of 2016. He works collaboratively on multiple fronts with organizations and civic leaders that support the growth of existing businesses, attracting new opportunities and providing an attractive environment for employees. Previously, Ron lived and worked in Kearney for 21 years, and he worked with the Economic Development Council of Buffalo County. Prior to discovering his true calling in community development, Ron had a long television career serving in management positions at stations in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Nebraska. He's also served as the Fremont Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director, the Nebraska Affordable Housing Commission Chairman, and an advocate for the establishment of the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Equity Fund. So Ron and Cliff, we welcome you. It's of your familiar faces because you're great at what you do and offer great tools and information. We welcome you to the HomeNE Network again.
Well, thank you, Leanne. Am I starting off first, or is Cliff?
I think we'll have you kick it off, Ron.
All right. Well, I'd like Cliff to jump in anytime in my presentation. And if we can go ahead and get the first slide up, Sherry, that'd be great. And at the risk of being Captain Obvious here, housing is one of the hardest thing any of us do. And it's particularly hard in smaller communities. I see a lot of my NETA colleagues on the call today, and I think over the course of my economic development career, housing has become one of those things, well, why are you doing it? To become one of the things that people ask, why are you not doing more? I see Rick Nelson's on the call, and I think back in the 1990s when we were just getting started with the Nebraska Housing Commission and some of the other initiatives to position the state to be more effective and competitive in developing housing, that wasn't a topic most economic developers were focused on. But it's evolved over the last several years to become one of the most important things that we do. So next slide, Sherry. As we engage in housing development activities, and especially, I think, speaking from personal experience in the Crew subdivision project, nothing goes as planned. And I think you should enter any kind of project like this, recognizing that best laid plans, you've got to be flexible and adaptable and be able to change course if necessary to get the ultimate product completed. Next slide. Finding partners is really, really critical to the process, but it's really hard to do as well. You need partners on the civic side, the municipal government side, and in the private sector. And it's important to be able to reach out and bring in the appropriate partner at the right time to get things done. I'm not reluctant to ask for help or seek out help at all, but sometimes I don't know what the help is that I need. So having more people involved in the process on a regular basis is really, really important. Next slide, Sherry. And this has become even more of an issue this past year than it has been before, but costs are going to escalate, and contractors, it's like herding cats. Finding a contractor that you can work with and rely on, boy, if you find one, keep them. That's the gold standard. It's really, really difficult to do a project without somebody that you can trust and rely on. On this topic, oftentimes you're going to have to import people, and importing people from a metro, that in and of itself is difficult, but then you run into the risk of not making friends with your local subcontracting or contracting community. So you got to be prepared for that pushback as well. If you don't have capacity locally, you've got to build capacity. And sometimes bringing in somebody from the outside is the fastest way to get people motivated locally to get something done or to get more capability established in your community. Next slide. Regulators don't always, and when I say regulator, getting things pass through the local building officials or a city council or other regulating bodies is sometimes a difficult task because they don't share the same sense of urgency that I do or the project does. And oftentimes they're looking through their process through a different prism than I do. So it's very important to be able to develop relationships and build confidence and to make sure that the folks that you've got to get approvals from are well informed and understand the scope, the breadth, the importance of the project that you're trying to promote. Sometimes you need supporters, but they're not always reliable supporters. They don't always show up when you need them. And gosh, it's really, really important that you develop those kinds of relationships where you can call on people to get stuff done. Even if, there was a recent example of a difficult economic development project out in western Nebraska, southwestern Nebraska, where they were trying to get a large feedlot approved. And initially, not many people showed up to support the project before the County Board of Supervisors, and it was only a 3-person board of supervisors. There were a lot of people that expressed concerns or neighbors that didn't like the idea, and they showed up. And so the project didn't move forward. It didn't get the vote that it needed. Well, that made everybody back up and get reorganized and recognize they needed to do a better job of communicating and getting supporters in the room. Even if they didn't say anything, just having supporters in the room is important sometimes. Next slide, Sherry. So, most important rule for me is to understand that I don't know what I don't know. And it's important to ask for help. That's when I turn to people like Cliff Messner, Rick Nelson, other people that have been around the block a time or two and have experienced pushback or have experience with a particular kind of project. And it's important to have those sounding boards and people involved that you can rely on, that you can use as that sounding board and get feedback. So the next slide, please. With all of that difficulty, why do we even try? Why do we do it? Well, it's so important because growth is not going to happen in our community if we don't have the right kind of housing in our community. Jobs sleep in the houses that we create. And employers say they need more people. Well, the only way to get more people in our community is have places for them to live. So it is critical, number one, for retention of existing businesses if they want to grow. And number two, for any new businesses that want to come into the community, but also for existing residents who have changing housing needs. There are first-time buyers, there are last-time buyers. And in order for those two ends of the spectrum to move in the market, you've got to have housing choices that are appropriate for them at their particular time of life. That means you can't get stuck. And one of the most surprising statistics that I heard recently came from Cliff. And he said, many of us are assuming that we need to be building houses that fit the nuclear family. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your presentation, Cliff, but there's only 27% of the home buyers out there that actually have kids in the home. Most home buyers are in those other categories, either singles, empty nesters, widowers or widows. And we need to start looking at what their needs are and including them in our decision-making process to build housing choices for our communities. Next slide, please, Sherry. So looking ahead, in the next 7 years, Holdridge is going to lose 220 workers. simply because of the demographics and the population bubble that's moving through our community right now. And although we grew modestly over the past census period, we're not growing fast enough to reverse that trend. We've got to grow faster. And 1% a year, that essentially translates to 10% over the next census cycle is necessary for us to show modest growth at the end of that cycle because of deaths, people that we lose to moving outside the market. So all of those things considered, we've got to build houses, not only for the people that are here now, but for the people that we hope to attract. And also those kids that may go off to school and that will be coming back to the market at some point in the future. Next slide, please. So in order to do all of that, our key is we want to build relationships. Even if it's not a direct line to a house built next week or next month or even next year, but we need to build relationships with people that can make things happen or that influence the way things happen. So that includes policymakers and decision makers at the local level, state level, regionally, in the private sector and public sector. We need actionable data. That means we've got to do housing studies and have data that lenders can make decisions on, builders can make decisions on, realtors, all of the people that are involved in that process. And then we have to communicate, I say relentlessly, on all fronts, all the time, repeating messages that we're tired of hearing, but essentially educating all of the people that are involved in the housing development process to understand what the needs are and to build consensus that we've got to be able to move forward together. And we can't get discouraged or deterred. We might on a daily basis encounter things that say, oh, why do I keep banging my head against this wall? But you can't be deterred. If you care about the future of your community, you got to show up every day and be focused on creating something every day. It's harder in smaller communities. You drive through Omaha right now, you drive through Lincoln, you see lots of stuff happening. And so why do developers there, builders there, what's the incentive for them to come out and do something in your community? Well, in our case, we've looked for ideas from others in our relationship network, and we've borrowed some what may be some risky ideas, but we're gonna employ them in our community because we hear over and over again from developers and builders that we've got to strip away as much risk as we can to attract them into our market. So we're introducing a purchase guarantee program where if a builder will construct housing to our specifications, and essentially in the case of Crew subdivision, we're still using the rural workforce housing model from the first round. The housing we're going to build out there, this next phase of housing, will have to be available for purchase at $285,000 or less. So on your screen, you see a series of lots that are in the orange circles, lots 1 through 11. Those are all going to be townhouses, similar in some respects to the townhouses that Cliff built. Those are in the green circles, 4 through 9. the difference is our townhouses in this next phase will include basements that are unfinished, but they're well prepared for finishing out with additional living space, bedrooms and bathrooms. So that it enables a family to grow into them over time. Or if they're not, if they don't need the extra space, they can use it for storage or whatever, but it improves the resale value of the property as well. And then those 3 lots, 1, 2, and 3 in yellow, we're looking at an apartment, multifamily, either some sort of 4-plex, 6-plex, something like that on those lots. Rentals are really, really important right now. We're underbuilt in rentals, and we're looking at other parcels right now that will allow us to add more traditional rental apartment style rentals. But we're also looking at more townhouses as well as single family and future developments. But right now we're focused on Crew. Crew was built using rural workforce housing funds. PCDC contributed $250,000 into the project, and that got a match from NIFA of $250,000, and then DED awarded us, I think it was $318,500. So with that money, we constructed the infrastructure for the project. PCDC bought the bond, so we'll receive the TIF proceeds as taxes are generated there. And then Cliff Messner's group built duplexes for rent on the Red X lots, and then the 6 townhouses on the Green Circle lots. So that essentially wraps it up for me. I see there's any questions here. Did
You're
Ron
good,
just
Ron.
call us old? No, Rick. Experienced is what I think I meant. So I'm
Okay.
happy to take questions, or we can hear Cliff's and we can take them all together at the end.
Does anyone have questions for Ron at this point? Otherwise, we'll let Cliff launch into the story of Crew subdivision a little deeper. Hearing or seeing none, Cliff, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't prepare a presentation. Would you go back to Ron's slide on building relationships? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about how Messner Development Company works. We're unique, but not singularly unique. There are only 3 or 4 groups in the state that do what we do. But we work in multiple communities across the state, 12, 15 across Nebraska and Kansas all the time. And one of the things that happens with that is that we simply don't have time to go in and learn every community. And we can't keep up with what's happening in every community, and we can't build relationships with city councils and planning and zoning groups in every community. So what happens is, but we never ever, with maybe one exception, work by ourselves. We always have a local partner. So in Fremont, it's the Housing Authority. In Schuyler, it's Schuyler Development Corp. In Norfolk and Columbus, it's NeighborWorks Northeast. In York, it's YCDC. In Aurora, it's the Aurora Housing Development Corp. In Hastings, it's HEDC and the CRA, et cetera, et cetera. We always have a local partner that we rely on to develop those relationships with their city council, the planning and zoning group. We rely on those groups to tell us what their community needs, what is going to be acceptable and what isn't going to be acceptable. We rely on those local partners to bring people to the table when we need public support. We rely on them to block and tackle for us so that if there are issues brewing out there that we need to know about, they bring them to us and tell us what those issues are. That's the way we work. And we have no ability to go in and keep track of what's happening with all the communities otherwise. So what happens with those partners is critical to us every place we go. The other thing that I will say, and please don't take this wrong, but communities need to understand that we have more people coming to us than we can possibly help, than we can possibly work with. So we have to pick and choose those communities where we want to work. And we obviously want to go to the communities where we can be successful. And part of that is the housing need issue. But frankly, probably an even bigger part of that is who's our local partner? Are they people we can work with? Are they people that will stand with us that we can trust to help us move things through? And we tend to go back to those communities where the local partner has stepped up and helped us and made things work for us. Frankly, there's a housing need in every community we go to, any place in Nebraska. We could go any place and build housing and it would work. What probably defines us more, the communities we choose more than anything else, is who's the local partner? Who's helping us out? How good are they? And will they stick to it when they need to? We have had occasions when that relationship is run into a problem one way or the other. And one of the things that we see in the small towns, of course, is that the organizations are fairly small. And we typically have a key person in those organizations that makes everything happen and keeps things smooth and keeps things moving along. Sometimes we will have a situation where someone just retires, where somebody gets offered another job someplace else and leaves, and suddenly our relationship with the community is a little bit different, and we have to kind of restructure and figure out what we're doing in that community. Haven't had a lot of examples of that, but we've had several. Holdridge was a community that we've gone to repeatedly. We've done 5 housing projects in Holdridge. That's because we always had good support in the community. We had good partners there that were helping us out. One of the things that happened with the Crew subdivision was that we had some people who left, who weren't in their positions anymore. And things became a little tentative and awkward. And it's a great example of somebody else in the community stepping up, because what happened was PCDC stepped in and said, well, there are other issues out there. We'll step in and make it happen. And Ron stepped up and completed the things that we needed to have done. He became the go-between between us and the city council and the planning and zoning. And he was there to smooth over and make sure that everybody understood what was going on and to move everything forward. And I think that's why this seminar kind of got started, was for people to understand that had someone at the community level not stepped up, that project wouldn't have happened, because we don't have the ability to do it without a local partner. Um, and we had good support from a group there for a long time, and we still have good support from them. But because of the other stuff that happened, it was necessary to have somebody else step in to build that relationship, to make that relationship happen with the mayor and council, planning and zoning, to help us out with the builders and all the other issues. And that's really the point that I wanted to make today, was for people to understand how critical that is, and that relationship is really what attracts us to a community. And the abilities and the skills of that local partner is what makes us keep coming back. So that's my point. Ron, do you want to add to that on as it relates to Holdridge?
Maybe elaborate just a little on the circumstances. We had in our community there was a disagreement between the Housing Development Corporation and the city attorney. And it was on another project, but because of the similarities and some of the cross-pollination between the projects, the city attorney was an obstacle to completing Crew subdivision, because he wanted to use Crew subdivision as a lever to obtain a result with the other project, even though they were unrelated. So sometimes logic is not a part of the process, not a part of the conversation, and you've got to find a way to get it done irrespective of that. And it can be uncomfortable for all the parties to do that, but somehow, some way, you got to find a way to make it work. If city attorney is not happy, he can make things before city council much more difficult as well. So I'll leave it at that.
From our perspective, you know, we want a local read from somebody that we can trust to give us an indication whether things should move forward or things should die, or and just help to work through the thing. And we knew the need was significant in Holdridge, and we thought it needed to move forward, but it frankly wouldn't have without somebody locally stepping up and simply making it happen.
I see we have Dave Merman, Senator Dave Merman, on the call as well. And I just wanted to take a minute to make the point that the legislature's decision or support to create the rural workforce housing program is appreciated. It has played a meaningful role in the work that is going on out in rural Nebraska. So I wanted to thank Dave publicly for his support of the program.
Well, thanks a lot, Ron. And thanks a lot for inviting me on this Zoom. I got to apologize. I was a little late at a dentist appointment, but I know how important rural housing is. Well, housing is in the whole state, but especially in rural Nebraska. And, you know, it's going to be really difficult for businesses to grow in rural Nebraska and attract new businesses and expanding business in the state if we don't have the housing. You know, it's, especially in the smaller towns, I guess, other than it's critical all over, but in the smaller towns, you have to drive a long distance even to find a place to live, to be able to have the opportunity to work in a smaller town. That it just adds one more hurdle to getting more business into the state. So we've got, so many things in the state of Nebraska, especially since COVID, that are attractive to people all over the country to, want to move into a more rural, less crowded part of the country. And, housing is one thing that's kind of holding us back a little bit. And I know it's only going to get more difficult going forward with the way costs of everything to build or expand are going up. But appreciate all what you guys do to make it possible and to enhance and to provide this housing that is so badly needed. So thank you very much, Ron.
So we have a question for Cliff, and we're going to open it up for question and answers right now. I've got a couple thoughts written down too, but for Cliff, Leanne asked if there were common challenges that often occur in planning and zoning that are hurdles that could be anticipated and then thereby avoided. Some things to think of before you launch a project.
There are a couple things that come to mind right away. The first is whether your city council and planning and zoning are thinking about the same kind of housing that you are, and whether they're on the same page. One of the things that we did on a prior webinar was we were talking about our aging population, how many seniors we have that are trapped in their 3-bedroom homes. Ron mentioned that only 27% of our houses have children. And consequently, we have a growing number of communities or a growing need, I should say, for townhomes and smaller units. And most city councils are still thinking in terms of, we want everything to be a 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-car garage ranch with a full basement. And that doesn't always work. That's not really what I think we need across the state right now, because I think we have a desperate need for housing that is more affordable for young people that are trying to get started. And we need zero entry housing for seniors that are trying to get out of the help, all the work that's involved with that 3-bedroom home. So a lot of times we need somebody to kind of lay the groundwork for that and say, look, this is what's needed. This is why we need to move in this direction, and kind of prepare people for thinking that's a good thing, and that there's a need for it. The other place that we often run into issues, of course, is tax increment financing. There's always controversy around that. Some people like it, some people don't. And that's not an issue that, we like to go into blind. Some communities we work in do tax increment financing, some of them don't. But we don't want to find out that answer at city council. We prefer to have our partners talk to the city council and say, where are we on this? Is this something we want to TIF or not TIF? And give us the read. And then we can proceed with the thing. But if it's a hard no, there's no reason for us to go in and have a public to-do over it. And that's better. That comes better, frankly, from the local partner discussing it with their city council.
Okay. And Ron, I remember when this was all unfolding and developing, just the importance of the project that you brought to many different groups. I think you had some education sessions with the CRA that I attended one of those.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about how that came about?
Well, CRAs, there's probably a lot of variability across the state with the interpretation of CRA law and what you can do and what you can't do. And there's also, typically CRA authorities are set up as volunteer organizations that don't necessarily bring a lot of development expertise with them. So I think it's really helpful to bring in people that have had experience in the trenches, as well as some legal voices that do have experience in that area that can help a CRA understand what their capabilities are, how they go about doing projects, whether they can be proactive or reactive. And I think it would be helpful if more communities that have CRAs established would encourage or provide opportunities for CRAs to see how or where the best practices are, what other communities are doing. That would be very, very helpful, because oftentimes CRAs, they're just inexperienced and don't know. So we brought in David Levy from Baird Home. We brought in Mike Bacon from Gothenburg, and also I can't. Rick,
Carl
you may
Elmschweiser.
Yeah,
Yes.
from out in Ogallala. Those were very helpful to our CRA, but we're still kind of feeling our way along. We're not there yet. It's going to take more projects, more time for our CRA to feel like they are really functioning on all 8 cylinders. There's another, and maybe somebody on the call today could help me with this, but I have a question for the group, if that's okay, Lori.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering how state building codes, which are often adopted by localities, how much that influences the cost of development nowadays, and if the codes that are in place are as flexible and innovative and responsive as they could be. That's just an open question. I don't know.
Okay. Does somebody have a response for Ron as you process this question? What's maybe going on in your backyard? I know that Holdridge had some very firm stances on lot size and different things that you had to battle. Is that correct?
Correct. Street widths, construction materials. There's more innovation in the building industry today. And sometimes innovation can be stymied by outdated building regulations, or at least that's the premise I start from. And I just wonder, how are building codes used and not used, or how could they be better?
Okay. Somebody want to share with Ron some thoughts about what's happening in your area or what you're doing to embrace the innovation that we are seeing?
There clearly are some issues that are there. You named 2 of the big ones with lot sizes and street widths. We're fighting those battles in a couple communities right now, and there's a change right now, because, and it goes back to the fact that we have a lot of houses that don't have children. If you have a family of five, you want a big backyard so you can kick the kids out there and have a few minutes of quiet. But when you're all single households, the backyard is just something you have to mow all the time. And we're seeing more and more people that are opting out for the small lots instead of the large lots. The street width at times is a problem because it's contrary to what we try to build with walkable communities. Because the street widths invite a wider street invites faster cars. And that doesn't work well in the residential areas as far as we're concerned. The other problems that are there are sometimes not so much a problem of cost as it is consistency. You know, we tend to use the same contractors in multiple communities. And when they have to go in and find out what worked in other communities doesn't work in this community, then all of a sudden it seems like we're backing up and redoing things. And having that more consistent would be really helpful to us, because then we would know when we go in what we have.
I was thinking at NIFA, there was somebody speaking on the importance of maybe statewide more consistency and a level playing field in regulations and building codes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I interrupted you though, Cliff. What were you?
No,
continuing to say?
I was trying not to say that, but I was hoping somebody would. So thank you for saying it.
Sure, anytime. I just want to follow up too, after the educational sessions with the CRA, then shortly thereafter, I remember going to a meeting of the CRA to consider the project, and the room was filled. Someone had done a great job of getting supporters to that CRA meeting. And that goes back to one of Ron's earlier comments, you know, having supporters appear, and it could have gone either way, perhaps. At that time, had no one from the public showed up to express their support for the project going forward. But with a room full of builders, developer, or contractors, suppliers, general public, I think it really stressed to the CRA the importance of recommending the project to the next level. Do you remember that, Ron and Cliff?
Throughout that process, Ron brought people to meetings repeatedly.
Yes.
And I kind of kidded them about it, because he shouldn't have to bring the same people in front of city council multiple times. I said the city should figure it out the first time. But Ron being Ron wasn't leaving anything to chance, and did a great job of getting people there and getting that support. I don't know that there was necessarily a lot of resistance, but there wasn't a lot of support until they found out that the employers wanted it.
Okay.
And that was the difference. If the employer said we have to have this, they were ready to go. It wasn't necessarily a fight, but they wanted to hear from the local people, not from me.
Okay. So as we kind of begin to wrap up, how would housing look in Holdridge today if Crew subdivision had not gone forward? What would we be facing today? Because I've heard Cliff at NIFA say housing is at a crisis stage in Holdridge, and we're not alone. It's in crisis across the state. But what might we be facing today in Holdridge had this project not become a reality?
I'd turn the question just a little bit, Lori, but I think Crew subdivision and the work that's been done so far doesn't fill, but it meets a housing need that we have in the community. But it also demonstrates to those in decision-making positions what's necessary to get housing So it's a roadmap and an example that we can point to for future projects. And my hope is that our future projects go a little smoother as a result of the experience that we've developed on this one.
Thank you, Ron. So any questions for our speakers? Feel free to open your microphone.
There's got to be somebody out there that thinks we're full of it. Tell us.
Well, I want to throw your contact information on the slide. Next slide is they're pondering their questions for you. If you do have questions today or after the webinar or tomorrow, if something comes to mind, feel free to reach out to either Cliff or Ron. We've got their contact information there on the screen for you. And they are super knowledgeable and always willing to lend a hand. They really understand the importance of partnerships and conversation, and just what helps one community also helps another community. So as we begin to wrap up, I do want to just remind you that all of our past webinars, including today's webinar, is located on our website, and you can find anything from the very beginning back in February of 2018 on this website. And then, as I promised, I wanted to give you a spring gathering recap. We met last week in Wood River, about 25 individuals, and we kind of returned to our original roots. We toured not only Wood River, but we also toured the village of Phillips, where there are both some dynamic things happening in both communities. Wood River talked about starting 10 years ago with a needs assessment survey and working from the priorities that were established in that needs assessment survey to today. They now own a child care center. The Wood River Vision 2020 group owns a child care center. New homes are being built, a brand new aquatic center. And we got to see and experience all of those things. And then at noon, we had lunch in Grand Island and heard from Sue Friedrichsen from the village of Palmer, who started out with a goal of just flipping one home so she could make sure her son and his family didn't move into her basement. And now she is part of the Palmer Economic Development Group, who is building 14 new homes in a town of less than 500 people. And then finally, we ended up in Phillips, Nebraska, a town of 350 people who, among other things, are building a 55 or 56 lot subdivision. There are homes already built and owned and occupied, and more homes underway. They hope to increase their population to 500 people or more. And they just have visions and goals for the community. Everything has a plan. So if you missed out, we will be having another gathering later this year, but it was a great day, and really stress the importance of dreaming big as a small rural community, and you can accomplish everything you set your mind to. So at this point, I'm also going to turn it over to Leanne to introduce you to something new on the forefront of HomeNE.
Yes, we're excited. It's a very easy to remember shortcut URL, homene.us. And Sherry's going to take us to that website. And the big part that we knew we needed was to improve functionality. As we've grown 40, near 50 webinars now, I think this might be the 49th. It was becoming increasingly challenging to find the one that you wanted, to go back to and refer and learn from. So we're just going to highlight a few things on our, we tackled that with our new website and a new platform and a new look. As you'll see, just a short description and acknowledging the Department of Economic Development. And then we have our events that come following. And so at any time, the next webinar registration, if you lost the email or if it went to spam or you accidentally deleted, you can just hit the image, the block there, and then you can automatically register. So that's a shortcut for you. And it'll say when the gatherings are announced or any of those other things that you'll be able to see. And then the webinar recordings. This is just a thumbnail, just a quick view, but never fear, there's a lot more to show, but we're going to go back to that in just a second. And then we have the Housing Study Light, which is a great resource that Sharon Heffley and a group of, probably 15 across the state, they worked on in 2018 to develop just an easy toolkit that has examples of surveys and those kind of things. You're welcome to look at that, and you can reach out to either us or your local economic development district to ask for assistance in learning more, because that's where you can get some of that data and the surveys that can support bringing in a developer or that can support applying for a trust fund and such. But for a moment, we'll go into the recordings, the webinar recordings, and you just hit that either at the top or you hit see more, view more. And it's got them categorized by 3 things, but then the whole thumbnail images are now visible, and they've got a nice shortcut description. But you can, most of all, you can search by tag. So if we wanted to search Cliff Mesner, because we know he did another couple of ones, and I just can't remember which one it was that I wanted to learn more. And then we had him built in for a tag for a couple that might come up. You can search by town, so you might put in Binkelman, because we know that they've been featured a couple of times, and you can see, oh, there's 4 that talked about Binkelman. Now the webinar may not have been solely focused on that, but if we had a focus like on Holdridge today, Holdridge will be a tag word, then you can look on that. You can also just do by topic. So let's just say tiny, like tiny homes. You can put in tiny homes, and you're going to see that 2 things came up. If we just tested this before, and if a phrase doesn't come up, you can try just doing 1 word. So just tiny or cottage or small, and then those kind of things. So tiny house doesn't come up, but tiny homes does. So those are just some great tools and resources. You can encourage city council members to go on here. It's a lot more user friendly now, and we want you to take advantage of it. And let us know your feedback. If you ever have any questions or thoughts on future suggestions for webinars, we're always open to that too.
Thank you, Leanne. So just as we begin to conclude, we love hearing from you, and more than one occasion people have called to say, I remember you doing a webinar, but I don't remember when it was. This new website will help you search, but we still want to hear from you. We love the relationships that have been built through HomeNE. So if you're having trouble finding a webinar, still feel free to call us, and we'll be glad to help you. So just talking about next month's webinar, that will be July 21st, and we're continuing the story of success in our rural communities. And Callaway, Nebraska will be joining us. If you don't know where Callaway is, it is in Custer County, and they're going to be just telling their story about the new housing development and the progress being made in their community. So looking forward to hearing from them. So Ron and Cliff, once again, thank you for joining us and for sharing the struggles and the success of Crew subdivision. I am encouraged and glad to see what's happening over in the northeast part of our community. So thank you for your time and effort and diligence. So are there any last questions or comments from the group today? Well, if not, thank you to everyone again, and have a great rest of your day.
Do we hit stop recording?
Oh,